Hi, my name is Zach Johnson, and today's going to be part three of a three-part series on an introduction to Ableton Live. Here at the Garnish Music Production School, I'm going to be talking about MIDI instruments, an introduction to MIDI instruments, and MIDI effects. But before we get started, because we're broadcasting this live on multiple channels between Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and more, you could actually be submitting questions to myself while we're live for the next hour. So if you turn your attention over to YouTube, just search. You could either search Garnish Music or Garnish Music Production School. And right here, you will actually be able to submit questions. So I will be waiting towards the end of this, probably around last 15 minutes. So stick around, and then at the end as well, I'll be talking about more on the Garnish Music Production School. So for now, though, what I really like to do is give you an introduction to MIDI, but I also want to point out that the reason why we are doing these live streams, well, at least for my portion of the live streams, because we are actually doing live streams every day as of right now. But really to give you an idea of what a class might be like at the Garnish Music Production School. So if this was either a Zoom class or an in-person class, it's very hands-on. Usually, I'll give some sort of demonstration or lecture into Ableton Live, and then putting these practices to use. So it's kind of a sneak peek, but at the same time, because we're not actually in person, so to speak. This is again just to give you a nice introduction into what we teach and what we offer at the Garnish Music Production School. So without further ado, let's actually turn our attention to Ableton Live here, and you can see that I do have Ableton Live open, and right now we're looking at the session view. So if you're curious about how to set up Ableton, which version you should look into purchasing or getting from ableton.com, and have questions about audio and just the overview, the layout of Ableton, check out some of my previous videos that are posted on the Garnish Music Production page, and also other videos that we also have on our YouTube channel. So, but today, what I'm going to be talking about is specifically MIDI and using MIDI clips and how to record using MIDI and MIDI effects. So one thing I'd like to point out though about MIDI, and something you should know right off the bat when it comes to working with MIDI in Ableton, right over here in the upper right hand side, you're going to see a couple of key components here that you should know and understand. So right here, this is called the computer MIDI keyboard. Next to that is the key map mode switch, and then next to that is the MIDI map mode switch. So basically what this allows you to do, when we set it to this MIDI map key switch, this allows me to actually use my laptop or desktop computer keyboard as a active MIDI device in real time. So what does that mean? That means basically if I wanted to, I could use my available keys on my laptop keyboard to trigger notes. So if I wanted to play keyboard sound, or if I wanted to maybe play some drums in real time, MIDI triggering, like tapping actually on my laptop keyboard, I could do that. And a really good key command that everyone should know right away is that if you could click on this, you use your mouse to click to activate and deactivate this MIDI switch. However, if you hit M for MIDI, that will also activate it as well. So M for MIDI, and you can also hit M for MIDI again to deactivate it if you'd like. Okay, so these two parameters are a little bit different when it comes to MIDI mapping. Now these, what we call Keyswitch MIDI map, and you'll notice that my screen is now highlighted in this kind of orangish, hue, orangish color. And basically what this allows you to do is custom MIDI map your laptop keyboard or your desktop keyboard. So for example, if you notice that the highlighted areas here, these don't actually have any sort of custom hotkey. And so if I wanted to, for example, I could turn the record button in the playhead to actually have it have some sort of MIDI mapping. And by that I mean, if I just literally click on it like this and then hit, say, the key of R on my laptop keyboard, okay, you'll see that R will now pop up here. And then if I come over here and then turn the key switch mode off, the next time I go to record, rather than clicking record up here, I can just hit R, and now we'll start recording, okay? And the good news is if you want to quickly, maybe customize some settings and maybe play around with different ideas, it doesn't, you can always replace this. So again, I can hit the key switch up here, or on my Macintosh computer, I can hit Command K, and I can come over here, hit delete on my keyboard, and now it's back to its default settings. Okay, hit Command K again for key switch mode, and then that will also be deactivated. Next to that, okay, if you hit Command M, you'll notice that the same parameters have been highlighted, but also you could just hit this switch here, MIDI, at the very top. And so if you have any third-party external hardware device, so if you have your own, let's say a MIDI fighter, there's so many different hardware MIDI controllers out there on the market that you can custom MIDI map those parameters, okay, if you want, to work in Ableton. So, for example, for any of you who own the Ableton Push series, the Ableton Push or the Ableton Push 2, you can learn more about the Ableton Push on Ableton's website. But that already comes custom MIDI mapped and is designed for Ableton users. But if you want to get under the hood, if you want to see what's happening and you want to customize it further, Command M for MIDI mapping, and you can customize that further. Okay. So just talking about that stuff is really important to know and understand. But what we're going to shift our gears on now is we're going to talk about how you can create MIDI tracks and you can manipulate MIDI files, similar to what we did last session when we were looking at audio, but more specifically looking at the Ableton Instruments panel. Okay, so if you come over here under categories, you'll see a section called Instruments. And in here, you're going to find a series of different types of synthesizers to sample-based instruments. Okay, and we're going to take a look at a couple of these, but I'm going to start out with some cool ones that I found earlier that I thought you might enjoy here. And basically what we're looking at is, again, these extensions of .alc, which is an Ableton Live clip, and then the extension .adv or ADG, sorry, that is an Ableton device group. So basically what these two things are, they're actually instruments. One of them has built-in samples and the other one is a synthesizer engine. More specifically, if you're wondering where I got these sounds from, under the instruments panel, one is from the wavetable instrument that Ableton has. That's a wavetable synthesizer. And then the other one that we're going to take a look at is a preset from the drum rack series, and actually technically the pack series that it comes from is under the Beat Tools. So I purposely am only going to be using, for owners of the full Ableton suite, you also have these sounds. So there's nothing exclusive here. This is stuff that you should have access to, and you could do a quick search. Again, for searching and that topic, you can refer back to my overview and layout series on our YouTube page. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and preview these sounds so you can get an idea what they sound like. Here's the first one. Okay, it's called Meditations Chromatic. And then this one right here. So what you're previewing is an actual drum kit. So what I can do, this is how easy it is to load in a drum kit into a MIDI track now, because we're not using audio tracks, not to confuse with these two tracks here. And remember, the key command to open up your own MIDI track is Shift Command T, okay, to open up a MIDI track. And then if you can't remember that, or you're just starting out, and with the key commands, I always try to show you those first. But the manual way, you could just right click anywhere inside here in the session view and then insert a MIDI track. Okay. But the cool thing is that I don't need to do that. If I literally wanted to just click and drag this in anywhere inside here, it will automatically create a MIDI track for me. It will rename the MIDI track title with the kit name, and then we'll load in what you're looking at right now is a custom drum rack with a built-in macro parameter here. Okay, so we get inside under the hood and see all the individual one-shots. And I can trigger them one by one, like this. Okay, but I can also, if I don't actually own let's say a third-party MIDI piano keyboard, which would be ideal to have, but let's say, you're just starting out and you're only working off your laptop. The good news is that you can also use your keyboard, your laptop keyboard or desktop keyboard. Like I said, M for MIDI, activate that. And if I want, I can actually start triggering notes. But before you start thinking you can just start playing notes, you have to do one other action. Okay, so there's two-part actions. One, M for MIDI to activate. And then part two, you need to arm the track itself. And when you arm something, it's not recording it, it's just letting this action become alive. So when I go ahead and start triggering notes on my laptop keyboard, okay, I'm hitting the A key literally on my laptop, S, and it will cycle through all these tracks, okay, or all these little individual snippets. Now, one thing I would like to point out, okay, and this happens a lot in the beginning when you're getting used to working with either a piano MIDI keyboard or your laptop or desktop computer keyboard, is that sometimes when you hit M for MIDI and you arm your MIDI track and you try to play sounds and nothing's coming out. So I'm hitting A through L, okay, and nothing seems to be triggering. And if you look closely right here in the actual drum kit, you'll see all these little yellow dots flash. That's letting me know that MIDI is activated. But the reason why you're not hearing the kit is because I'm too far out of the keyboard register range, okay? So two other keys that you need to know about when you are trying to trigger certain notes, whether you're going down to -C2 all the way up to C8 on the keyboard register, is the keys of Z and X. What Z will allow you to do is to shift down a full octave. The more you hit Z, you'll shift down further and further down the keyboard register. And then X does the opposite. X will actually shift up a full octave. So really what's happening right now when I try to play notes is that I'm too far out of range. I'm literally one octave away from actually triggering these notes. Now, if I had a giant keyboard in front of me that was, I'm stretching my arms out because I'm trying to represent like an 88 keyboard, let's say 88 keys. Sure, if you play your fingers across the keyboard, inevitably you'll land on the right notes. But because computer keyboards can't represent 88 keys, that's why you have the Z and X function to get down to where I need to go. So if I hit Z once, watch, I'll hit Z, and now I'm on these notes. Hit Z again, and now I can start on that very first clip. But here's the fun thing about working with Ableton Live clips, is if you're brand new to programming and drumming, let's say you've never drummed before in your life, okay, and you want to study how drum patterns work, that's why Ableton allows you to use these Ableton Live clips. And remember, the Ableton Live clips are in the categories panel here, and you should have, for those of you who have the full suite, you have a lot of options here. But the cool thing is that as I look at the instrument here, I can now turn my attention to the clip itself by double clicking on the clip. And now I can see, and I can open this up, I can see all of the notes that are already being triggered. So this is the preview kit that you've heard, and Ableton does this so it can kind of set you up as a guide to getting started with all these different sounds. So I can hit the spacebar, hit play, Okay, or come up here and hit play. Sorry, you actually have to make sure you're on the clip. You can't just hit play without being on the clip itself. So what you're looking at right now is a 2-bar loop. Okay, and the cool thing is that when it comes to MIDI, is that you can say, hey, maybe I want this synth pattern to be deactivated, and the key command for this is 0, so I can actually turn it off if I just want the drums. Okay, turn it back on, hit 0 again. Okay, that's just one sample that in this particular kit that comes with these drums. And let's say, for example, I don't want that tonal bass. I just want the claps, the hi-hats, the vocal hey female sound, and so maybe I want to mute some other parameters, and we can preview these parameters. We can listen to them. If you look at here, you can see all the names of the actual notes. Okay, and if I click fold here, it will collapse all the notes that are actually being played. And you also have this little headphone symbol here, this monitoring tool that will allow you to preview all the notes before you commit to any ones that you start triggering inside here. So again, let's say I want to just maybe turn off the kick subtone double hit, so I can just either hit 0 to deactivate it or highlight it and hit delete so it's gone. Okay. Maybe this boom as well. I don't really want those notes, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn them off. So now we just have these drums. Okay, and I'm hearing, see, as I go through these, yeah, there's one more boom in there I'd like to maybe take out for this exercise. Okay. So what is happening here? What are you looking at? Right now you're looking at the grid, and you're looking at it in rhythmic divisions of 32 notes, or 1/32. And the clue for that, how you know that's actually happening, is yes, you could maybe count each one of these individual lines, and up to 1 bar would represent 32 individual slices. However, you can also look down here in the bottom right hand corner, and you look really closely on your screen, it'll say 1/32. So I can right click inside here, and I could say, let's set it to 1/8 notes, okay? And that should change the grid here. And why you might want to do that is because, like, look, maybe, for example, this hi-hat pattern, I think it's cool, but what if I want something just more straight, something a little bit more subtle and not too, I'm just not really into this pattern. I like the sound, but I want to play around with it myself. Well, I can highlight all of the notes like this, and I can hit delete, okay? And if you use the draw tool, the key command for that is B as in Bumblebee, B, but this is your draw tool, this is your pencil tool, and you'll see it pop up here. You can also come up to the upper right hand side here, and right next to where M for MIDI is activated, here's your draw tool. So if I just click and drag down or drag across like this, now I have this hi-hat pattern that's based off rhythmic divisions of eighths. Okay, so it's a little bit more straight. Okay, and let's say maybe I want to add in a couple of 16th notes here and there. I want to sprinkle them in. Okay, a great key command for this, you can right click again to select 16th notes, but an even faster way is hold down the command key. Again, I'm on Macintosh, command key, and then hit 1 as you hold the key command down. Hit 1 as in the number 1 on your keyboard, and now I just changed the grid to 16th notes. So if you hold down command and hit 1, it will go down in incremental sub-rhythmic divisions. It'll get faster and faster and faster. And then if you hold command and hit 2, you can actually expand those divisions. So from quarter notes to 1 bars to 2 bars, 4 bars, etc. Okay? So now that I'm on 16th notes, all I have to do is select an area where maybe I want to draw in some 16th notes. Okay. Maybe I'll put one right here for fun. Okay. And you don't always have to use the draw tool, by the way. If you wanted to just literally click down like this and draw in a note by using your mouse, nothing wrong with that. You can do that as well. And you can click and drag notes around. And if I don't like, for whatever reason, I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to click on this 808 snare, but can I scroll through and listen to the other clips? And the answer is yes. So maybe okay. And the other cool thing is if you look down here, you can expand this area here, and this is what's called your velocity area. So depending on what your velocity settings are mapped to in your kit, whether it's using a drum kit or if you're using a synthesizer, you could maybe select the velocity to adjust the volume. Okay, so if I want, maybe I want this hey to be a little bit quieter than the rest of the track. Okay, versus all the way down here to the point where you can almost just turn it off completely. As I bring it up, it gets louder. Okay, so if this were a class, if we were together in a class right now, we would take a pause, we would take a moment for you to try all these things out. Okay, so that's kind of giving you an idea of how the demonstration portion of this class works. It's 50-50. I'll give you some lectures, I'll give you some demonstrations, I will save time for questions, but then really at the end of the day, to utilize this to really get the most out of our classes and these demonstrations is to put it into practice. So this is where we would pause and I would say, okay, everyone try this out. Just try manipulating some of these drum hits, maybe play around with the velocity, purposely destroy it if you want, flip it around, manipulate it to the point where it doesn't sound, maybe it sounds chaotic. That's okay, that's fine. It's all about experimentation in the beginning here. And what do I mean by flipping and switching around and having fun with this? There's some other parameters in this area where you can do just that. So let me just give you a quick demonstration of this. If I hold down the key command A, it will highlight all of the notes at once. Okay, so this is selecting everything at once. You can literally click and highlight like this as well if you want, but the fastest way is command A in my opinion. And what can you do over here that would just make things a little bit different? Well, for example, if I wanted to, I could change the start time of the loop or the length of the loop, and I can add something called the groove in an area where I could add applied groove by changing the velocity and by changing the rhythm a little bit, the velocity and the quantization or lack thereof. And there's also some really awesome, cool tools where you could reverse all the notes. So just for fun, if I just click on this and hit reverse, technically everything just got turned around and it's gonna play these tracks or these MIDI clips in reverse order. So it actually changes the rhythm, okay? So that can be really fun as well. And if you're like, maybe not. Maybe let's go back to where we had it before. Not a big deal. You could just click reverse and now it's set back to normal. And just like you could with audio clips, you could double time or play at double tempo, and you could also play at half tempo. So what does that sound like? If I go ahead and just say, let's play at double tempo. Okay, you ready? Hit spacebar. Okay, plays twice the amount of speed that it was playing at before. Technically, my master tempo is set to 135, so twice as fast, okay? And I can always set it back. And then maybe I want to half time it. I can click here, and now it's playing at half the speed. Okay, so again, this is what I mean by having fun and experimenting and quote unquote making mistakes. Happy accidents. Maybe you stumble upon something and you didn't mean to hit this a certain section of the parameters, but it ends up being really cool. And then my job in class is to explain to you why you might like it and why you might not like it, breaking it down to the science. So anyways, So there's a lot of things you could do over here. We're not going to get into all of these parameters today because this is just an 1 hour preview of things that you can do and get started with now. But let's turn our attention to another MIDI clip now. And this MIDI clip is going to be a little bit different, meaning that it's not going to actually load in an ALC. It's not going to load in a preview for us. And I'll show you what I mean. So if I click and drag it in like this, okay, you'll notice that there's not a clip anymore. All right, but next to it, you'll see these little circles here. This is letting me know, oh, I can actually record my own notes in real time. And then down here, you're going to see what is called this is an instrument rack. And again, inside the instrument rack is where you could really see what's going on under the hood. And remember, this actual preset came from the wavetable synthesizer. So now we're not working with samples. Right now, technically, we're working with oscillation. Okay, so for any of you who are interested in diving deeper into sound design, we have a wonderful program on that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now with you, but we talk about synthesis versus sampling and different types of synthesis, from wavetable to subtractive to additive, like FM frequency modulation, etc. But for now, so what I'm using is a wavetable synthesizer with built-in macro parameters. And what I can do, rather than playing around and manipulating someone else's loop drum pattern, I can maybe record my own notes in. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the arrangement view. So this is something I showed you how to do in the last segment with audio clips. But moving from the session view into the arrangement view, I can click, hold down the track itself. Okay, and so now I have my MIDI clip here. And if I want, maybe I can hit Command D to duplicate it. So it's at least playing for 8 measures. Okay, and let's just play this real quick so we can hear it. And by the way, I can get rid of these audio clips too. If I don't want these in here, I can just say, okay, goodbye audio clips, because today I'm only working with MIDI. So we have a drum loop, and to hear what's happening here, if I wanted to, again, let's say my limitation right now is I only have a desktop laptop keyboard. Okay, desktop laptop, just a computer keyboard. So if I hit the A key, you can hear I'm triggering a note. And if I hit X, maybe I want to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go up the keyboard register. Okay, let me turn this down a little bit. So I'm going to just in real time record some notes in from my computer keyboard. Okay, and I'll show you a couple different ways you can approach this, but let me just show you the first way to approach this, where you could come up here and I'm gonna hit record, and it's gonna do a countdown of 4 clicks because of how I have my metronome set up, and then after those 4 clicks, it's go time. So here we go. Okay, so this was just a quick little performance of playing some chords, and I could come back here and then listen. Now, was it the best performance ever? No, okay, I'll admit that, but that's okay. The good news is that I can now get inside these MIDI notes that I've recorded, and I can edit them further. So let's say, yes, okay, I'm not a robot. I'm not gonna perfectly be snapped right to the quantization interval perfectly, right? There's a way to quantize the parts so they're snapped more to the grid. And by doing that, because I can highlight all of these notes like this, I can right click inside and say, let's go to the quantize settings. And it'll ask me, what do you want to adjust these notes to? Do you want to adjust them to 8th notes, 16th notes? Okay. And because I'm actually just playing quarter notes, I could go ahead and set it to quarter notes and hit OK. And now you'll see all these quarter notes are being added, but also the other thing that it's doing is it's extending these notes out, which is not a big deal because I can click on this brace here and drag them back like this. But now they should be perfectly snapped to the grid. So when I play this back, that's one way to approach this. Let me show you another way to approach this. Let's say in real time, you would like these notes to be quantized as you play along. And this is a really neat feature. I like this feature a lot in Ableton. So if you come up here and you go to the edit section, scroll down to where it says record quantization. And under record quantization, I could say, okay, because I'm playing quarter notes, let's set it to that. Or maybe just in case I end up playing some faster notes later on, or I'm going to play more than one section of a note per measure, I could set it to 8th note quantization. All right. So when I do that, even if I start to play off beat, okay, by accident, Ableton will adjust those notes to the nearest 8th note. Okay. So watch. Now I'm just going to improvise here. I'm just going to play some chords. And again, I'm playing on my tiny little laptop keyboard. And I'm going to hit arm. I'm going to hit record. Okay. Now, was that perfect playing? No. Okay. I could hear some moments where my playing was off a little bit, but take a close look at the MIDI. You see how it's perfectly snapped to the grid? That's not me. That's not me playing nicely. That is because the record quantization helped me out, assisted me. So do you always need that on? No. Is it a great tool to help you stay in time? Absolutely. So for those of you who are brand new to recording in real time and you need a little assistance here, that's another way to approach it. However, let's say you don't want it to be perfect. Let's play devil's advocate here for a moment. The complete opposite. Let's say some of you do play piano and you play an instrument and you are pretty good at staying in time yourself. Okay, you're comfortable, you're doing this for a while, and you don't want that quantization to influence your decision so much, meaning that you want it to still have retain some type of human feel. Okay, is there a way so that you can maybe have the quantization be off time a little bit? Is there a way so the velocity is not perfectly clean all the way across, hitting the exact note or hitting the exact velocity setting? Absolutely. Okay. And the way you can do this, a really awesome feature in Ableton is what is called the groove pool. Okay. Or technically it's the groove folder, and then inside there's something called the groove pool. So if I wanted to purposely unsnap these notes a little bit and play around with the velocity settings, all I have to do is come over here and hit this hot swap toggle button like this. And then inside here, okay, by the way, this lives in the category section, but the hot swap is one of the awesome features in Ableton where it'll get you right to where you need to go. And in this case, I have if you're looking at your folder and you're not seeing as many Ableton groove files, that's okay. I've downloaded multiple packs in the past, and there's a lot of great resources out there to download more if you'd like. However, and you can create your own custom grooves, by the way, but Ableton already comes with a lot of stock grooves, which can be really fun to use. So for example, if I look at, say, some of my favorites, like this disco live feel, okay? That's the little click that you're hearing is playing to 16th notes. So I double click on that, and it will automatically go into what's called the groove pool, okay? And it will show you the base of it is set to rhythmic divisions of 16th notes. The quantization is set to 0. The timing is set to 100%. The randomness is set to 0, so you can adjust that accordingly as well. And the velocity sensitivity is set to 50%, okay? So what you can do is you can preview, if I make sure I highlight all the notes, but I can preview what the velocity will do to this, and it might not seem that extreme at first. Let's just play it so you can get an idea. Okay. You might be able to hear it, you might not. It might not be that obvious, but what makes it more obvious is when I finally commit to this groove. Now that might seem intimidating, like commit. Is there a way to undo it? Of course, Command Z. You can always undo this and choose a different groove if you want. You can mix and match grooves if you want as well. But before I commit to this, I could come up here and play around with the settings some more. So I want to make this a little bit more extreme. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the velocity up to 100%. Okay. And the global groove amount, I'm going to increase that to 110. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit commit. And watch, you're going to see some things change over here. The velocity sensitivity is going to change. It's not going to be this nice, perfectly straight line across. And then the quantization is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so I'm going to click right here. Okay. And so if you take a look at some of my notes. Okay. They're not going to be perfectly lined up. They're actually all going to be off just a little bit. And when you do that, it actually makes this a little bit more interesting. And if it's still not enough, if you're like, you know what, that groove settings were not extreme enough, you might need to do something like adjust the velocity range, which can be done here, okay? And there's even a cool little feature where you could set it to randomize, where it'll just randomly select areas to adjust the velocity on your behalf. Click it like this, and now you see a bunch of different velocity ranges that have been changed. And the cool thing is that also you'll see the notes will change from lighter to darker, and the darker the note, the lighter or the more extreme the velocity, the brighter the note, the less velocity has been altered or modulated. So now when I play this, let's say I want to loop this, I want to keep enjoying it. Okay, I can just highlight all of the notes like this, hit Command L, and listen to it over and over. Now, the other thing I need to point out, okay, is that there's something called the probability section. And then in the probability section is that you can actually increase or decrease the chance of certain notes being played or certain chord progressions being played, which is really interesting. And so, for example, the chance of all of these notes being triggered or being played back at 100%, the chance of it happening is 100%. It's just that it will happen. But watch, if I do things like, let's say on these first notes here, I bring the chance all the way down and bring my velocity range all the way down. Now I'm going to hit play. So because there's a 0 chance of that note playing. But where it can get, and so that's pretty obvious, right? But where it can actually get interesting is where you actually change the chance, and you can actually change the randomness of the chance. But let's say I take all of the notes. Let me actually bring this all the way up like this and bring the chance level to 50%. To 50%. Let's get this one to 50. So there's a 50% chance that these notes will play, and there's a 50% chance they won't play. Which, again, why would you want to do this? Because it can give you some rhythmic suggestions that you wouldn't maybe necessarily think on your own. So let's go ahead and hit play. See, so it gives you some rhythmic ideas that tonally too could suggest other things. So that doesn't mean necessarily that the chords will always not play, but certain notes might play and other notes might not play. So if you're like, that's too much, but you want to play around with this some more, bring them all the way back up to 100% and then hit the randomize knob, where it won't affect the velocity as much, but it will randomly give you different ideas for the chance section. And so now you can see here, look at the chance. The chance is all over the place for all of these notes. But again, this might give you some fun, suggestive suggestions on different ways to approach playing around with the rhythmic values of these notes. So let's go ahead and hit play. Can be fun because it's now taking my straight kind of piano idea that I had before, right? Or just straight chord progression, and now it's almost creating this nice little rhythmic lead type feel. So that could be really fun as well. So let me just show you a couple of more things here that I think you might enjoy when it comes to using MIDI. First of all, could you possibly turn your MIDI into an audio clip? And this is a great thing that everyone should know when it comes to using Ableton. And that is by right-clicking on it, and you can actually take your entire clip and you could turn it into audio, okay? So what you want to do, actually, a couple of things I just want to point out is, one, you need to freeze and flatten it. Okay, so we can freeze the arrangement. And by the way, at this point too, if this were a real class, I would then take a break. We would stop after this demonstration, and then you would get a chance to try these things yourself once again. So again, 50-50 in our classes. I make sure I give you enough time to practice, and then if you get stuck on something or have questions at this point, we would dive a little bit further into it. Okay? So now once I freeze this section, I can then right click on it and I can flatten it and I can turn it into audio. So now it's an audio clip. And let's say you're like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Maybe I want to still see the MIDI. You could always hit Command Z, go back. And then what I like to do is hit Command D, create copies, and then maybe freeze a section and then have an audio clip as well. Now, why would I want to do that? Because there might be other opportunities that you could try with just using your track as an audio clip versus it having MIDI. Or let's say you make sample packs. Let's say you want to maybe make some loops for yourself and you want to share them with friends and maybe other producer friends to collaborate, and they're in a different DAW. Maybe they're not using Ableton. Maybe they're in Logic or Pro Tools or FL Studios, and you want to work together. This is what you would need to do, is create some stem files for them. So that's another great reason why you might want to turn some of your MIDI instruments into audio clips. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is MIDI effects, because that's one area we haven't really discussed yet. And something I want to point out is that if I wanted to like manually maybe draw in some notes again, or maybe just trigger some notes. So let's do both. If I hit Shift Command T, I can add a MIDI track. Remember, you can right click to add a MIDI track. And let's say I just want to throw in my own personal hi-hat sound. Okay, let's say I find a cool little hi-hat sound, and I click and I just drag it where it says drag and drop an instrument sample in here, and it loads in one of Ableton's flagship staple samplers called Simpler, one of my personal favorites, by the way. And then rather than recording the notes in or using someone else's clip, I can create an empty MIDI clip by highlighting a region like this, holding down Shift, Command, and M for MIDI to create an empty MIDI clip. Okay? And so what I can do is open up what's called the piano roll. I can zoom in here, I can zoom out there, and I can pencil in one note at a time if I'd like. Maybe hitting Command 2 a few times will get me to some eighth notes here, and I can pencil them in like this. Remember the draw tool, you can also just click, drag across like that. And the nice thing is, if I wanted to, yeah, you could see here, I brought some notes up. If I wanted to maybe have some higher pitch notes, the cool thing is that using a simpler is that you can actually use this to transpose your notes. Okay, but let me show you a neat little trick that you can do using something called the arpeggiator. Okay, so if I just click and draw one long note out like this, all right, and then I solo it and I hit play, you just hear that note naturally. That's how it should work. But if you go over to MIDI Effects and you grab something called the arpeggiator and you just drop it in like this, it will literally create eighth notes based off this one sample note. And I'm gonna go ahead, I just hit S for solo, or you can also click on S for solo, and then play the note back. And now it's triggering this note to play eighth notes. Neat, huh? So if I go ahead and just play it with the rest of my track, Maybe for some reason I'm not a huge fan of the hi-hats that are inside this track. So I can go ahead and actually, rather than deactivating them like this, I could go back to the instrument itself, find those hi-hats, mute them. So now you're just hearing my hi-hat. Okay, so maybe you want to separate these things. And the cool thing is, with this arpeggiator, maybe I want to make the notes sound like 16th notes. I could do that by selecting this to set to 16th notes. You can actually offset it and change the groove so it adds a little nice swing. You can add something called steps where it actually will add a little bit of transpose to it. And you can also do this with MIDI chords as well. So it's a wonderful tool, and it's a MIDI effect, and it lives in under the categories, the MIDI effects section. Okay. So the one thing you need to understand about MIDI effects is that it's exclusive to MIDI tracks, not audio tracks. So people get this confused in the beginning, which I completely understand. Audio effects are non-exclusive, meaning audio effects can be on MIDI tracks and audio effects alike, or audio tracks alike, okay? But with MIDI effects, you can't throw a MIDI effect on a audio track. Not to say you can't make it work with audio, you just can't throw on an audio track. It needs to go on an instrument track, okay? So just side note on that. But something else I want to show you that's really cool is right now all these chords that I'm playing are in the key of C major. And when you're first starting out, for any of you who are taking, by the way, we have other classes that talk about music theory. And so for those of you who are brand new to writing music, and for those of you who have experience, we dive in from starting out on like scales and you know, the basics of music theory. But for those of you who are brand new, and this might be a little intimidating at first, you know, starting with the white notes in the key of C major, or the scale of C major, just hitting the white notes is a great place to start. But let's say you want to hear, maybe you want to hear these notes, okay? But you want to hear what they would sound like in a different key. How can you do that? If you have no prior music knowledge whatsoever, no music theory training whatsoever, there's a really awesome tool called Scale, okay? And this is a MIDI effect. So what I can do is I can select the Scale MIDI effect and then click on this drop-down menu and choose a scale. And in this case, I want to maybe switch it from major, because right now my chord's under major key, and I want to maybe hear what they would sound like in a minor key. So what I can do is from this preset menu in the MIDI effects section is click where it says minor, and then just double click. I could drag it in like this. I could just drag it in, or I could double click. And now currently this MIDI scale function is set to the base of C. But because it's minor, these chords are no longer going to be playing in a major scale. They're going to be played in a minor scale. Now, when you're first starting out, you might not know the difference between major and minor, and that's okay. That's why we have these classes discussing the theory behind major and minor, but also understanding what it might feel like to you, or what it might sound like. And a lot of times people try to associate major and minor as minor being a little bit ominous, or maybe a little bit sadder, or striking a kind of a darker mood, whereas major chords tend to feel a little bit more uplifting and happy. Not to say that minor can't feel happy, but that's the first response a lot of times people associate minor and major with. So if I want these chords to be less happy and a little bit darker, I could use the minor scale function and then go ahead and play these notes back. Okay, so watch, if I turn this off, you will now feel the difference. Now you'll hear the difference. It is kind of happier. It makes you smile a little bit more versus, and if I want, I could try different basses. So what would it sound like in the key of G minor? So really, what is happening though? Like, hold on, let's back up for a moment. What is actually happening? Are these notes changing in real time? No. Technically, these notes are not moving. They're staying the way they are. But the MIDI effect itself is outputting those notes that are in the scale. So something you need to understand is that the C minor scale is different than the C major scale. What does that really mean? Is that in the C major scale, there's certain notes that are in that scale, and in the C minor scale, there are certain notes in that scale. So what's happening is Ableton, with the MIDI effect, will look at my notes and then say, okay, these notes don't fall in this scale, therefore we will force them to go in a scale that is part of that note. Okay, so for example, in the key of C major, E is in the key of C major, but E is not in the key of C minor. So really what's gonna output is that these notes are gonna be playing down here, okay? So it doesn't show you, it doesn't necessarily teach you what the C minor scale is, but it will at least get you going and it'll output the proper notes, quote unquote proper notes for you to begin. If you, again, if this were a class, in a class setting, you would learn about the different scales, the minor and the major, and we would take our time with this segment and make sure you understand these things. But when it comes to Ableton tools, this is a wonderful tool, and there are a lot more, by the way. There's a lot more. There's even a chord one that helps you, assist you with writing chords when you're first starting out. But something else I want to point out about this too is, besides the MIDI effects, because the MIDI effects, there's some awesome things here. And you can combine MIDI effects with audio effects, by the way. Just want to point that out as well. But really too, there's an awesome feature for those of you who want to learn more about MIDI, and keys and scales and things like that, is that over here there's an actual scale function, okay? And in the scale function, I can say, okay, show me all the C major notes, okay? All the ones that are highlighted are in the key of C major. But let's say I wanted to switch it to minor. Now Ableton's showing me which notes are actually in the minor scale. So I can take a close look and say, oh yeah, there's my E notes. Maybe I need to take those E notes and bring them down, okay? And if I look at these notes up here, these B notes probably need to go down, okay? Now it's minor. And I honestly kind of recommend that over the scale function. The scale function is a great way to get going, to get started. But really, if you're trying to explore this further on your own and see which notes are correct, you can use this wonderful scale function. Okay, so again, this was just an introduction to MIDI. I'm sure you probably have more questions for me. In fact, let's just turn our attention back to the website. Okay, and let's see, were there any questions? Turn our attention Oops, back. Gotta turn that up. Nope, not any questions today, and that's okay. But I do want to end this segment by showing you our website. Okay, if you go to edu.garnishmusicproduction.com, this is where you can learn more about one of our satellite schools. And you can see we're all across, I mean, from all across the world, actually, from London to Berlin to Hong Kong, here in the United States. I'm one of the many instructors, talented instructors. It feels weird calling myself talented. I mean, I'm one of the instructors at Ableton amongst a lot of other very talented individuals. And we have bases in San Francisco to New York, all over. But you can learn about one of our programs in one of our satellite schools here. And then also currently at the time of this recording, live online courses right now are 33% off. Okay, so you can click on this link and you can learn more about all the courses that are currently discounted. And also too, just pointing out that we have more than just Ableton classes. If your DAW of choice is Logic or FL or Pro Tools, you can sign up for a class that would specifically go into the details of those digital audio workstations. But then we also have more creative writing type courses like electronic essentials to hip hop production, to vocal production, and to even cinematic or orchestral production, the art of mixing, sound design, synthesis, hit songwriting, and more. So here are our program links. Here's our free streams tab if you want to learn more about the program itself. And yeah, so again, if you have any last minute questions for me about this program, I am here currently live on YouTube. You can also reach out to us on our YouTube page or directly linking or going to edu.garnishmusicproduction.com. And then for all the other YouTube videos, we have a lot of great content coming from the team up in San Francisco to their crew on the East Coast, for me in New York. And stay tuned for a lot more programming, a lot more YouTube videos that we'll be releasing in the near future. All right, so my name is Zach again. Thank you for tuning in. It's been great, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, either through YouTube or maybe at one of our online courses that we do via Zoom, and also one at our satellite schools. All right, until next time, take care, everybody.